to do is to provide information on the MZZU radar, which was purchased by the EPSCoR program and installed about a year ago now. And so what I'm going to talk, and there's a picture of it in action, if you can see your screens. And what I'm really going to talk about today are mostly the rainfall products that we will be making available or are available, the processing we go through, and the purpose of this is really, firstly, to inform the participants of the project what is and will be available from the radar, but also to find out from you what you would like us to provide. In order to do this, I'm going to go through some of the basics of how the radar works and how we process the data so that you may get an idea of what is or isn't possible, and kind of where we're at with the data. I'm not going to get too technical, but there will be some acronyms as I have to try and impress you with my knowledge of such things. So first up, the radar is located actually at the Jefferson Institute, but basically on the South Farm area, southeast of Columbia. The latitude, longitude, and altitude are shown in this slide. The radar basically became operational on July 1st of last year, but the data formatting, the establishment of a regular scan and data processing sequence came along a couple of months after that, towards the end of August. In terms of the coverage, this slide shows, again, the location of the radar in mid-Missouri relative to the three closest Weather Service radars. We have a lot of options in terms of the scan we can do, but the nominal scan, when there's rainfall occurring, has a range of about 95 kilometers. The thick blue range rings around the radar in the center of this are 25-kilometer range rings. So the outermost of these shows basically the effective range or the coverage area of the radar. But as I said, this can be adjusted both shorter and longer. Just a quick word, there are various different wavebands radars can operate at. This one is an X-band radar. It operates at about 3.2 centimeters wavelength. The reason I want to mention X-band radars have some particular issues in heavy rain. With a short wavelength, they undergo some signal attenuation that we have to deal with. The idea of the radar is to, well, the core mission for the instrument, for the project, is to produce rainfall estimates over the area of mid-Missouri, particularly the Hinkson Creek watershed. So that is our first aim, is to get those products out. We need to do some quality control of those. That means comparing the gauges. That's underway. But the point is that there are a number of different ways to derive rainfall rates from radar estimates. And so there are a wide number of products that we will be producing. To start off with, I'll mention that the radar itself is a dual polarization instrument. So in addition to the standard radar reflectivity that you normally observe in kind of weather service on TV radars, we have a bunch of other parameters. This is kind of the list of those parameters. The ones highlighted in orangey, yellowy color are those which directly go into the rainfall algorithms. The green ones, the ones highlighted in green, are used in the quality control algorithms to try and improve the data. In terms of the data processing, there's a number of ways we can do this. At the moment, we're following two directions. One is basically aimed at producing web-ready images, and one is aimed at producing quantitative products that we can use in things like rainfall estimation. So there are two software packages we're currently using. One is called PyArt, which is an open source Python-based package that we're basically using for the data processing. And the other is something called Warning Decision Support System in Intelligent Information, which was developed by the National Severe Storms Laboratory, and that's what we're using for most of the quantitative data processing. This allows us to do things like quality control the data, detect errors and noise in the data, non-meteorological targets that we're not interested in, and correct for those. It then allows us to calculate rainfall rates and also put these onto a standard Cartesian grid. On the right is an example of the kind of web-based system where the top image is the raw reflectivity, and the bottom one is the reflectivity corrected using the PyArt software for attenuation. So we have these two parallel paths. I won't really talk much about the display path. That's basically done in PyArt and just basically takes the raw data and does some general corrections for attenuation and velocity problems, and renders those for display on the website. The processing path uses this, what I'll call WIDS, everyone else calls it WIDS, WIDS software, which will ingest the raw radar data, do some quality control, and calculate the rainfall rate and grid the data onto a regular Cartesian grid, if that's what you want. This is the same stuff again. So the process within WIDS goes through a number of steps. There's a number of subroutines within it which do each of these steps, and I've mentioned them a couple of times already, so I'll go on to the next. The first thing to note regarding the radar data is that in the raw format, it comes in polar coordinates. I'll illustrate that in a couple of slides' time. The data itself is made up of a series of radial spokes that initiate from the radar and go outward, and each of those is built from a series of what are called range gates. Again, this should become clearer when I do a couple of slides. In general, to get the rainfall information, we set the radar to scan at fixed elevation above the horizon through a complete 360 degrees. So we're covering the whole area around the radar. We tend to repeat this at a number of elevations to build up the volume scan. This allows us to look at more detailed structure of the rainfall system, but also gives us more information we can use in the quality control. There are an infinite number of choices we can make regarding how quickly we scan, the elevation angles we scan at, the number of elevation angles we use, the maximum range we go out to, the length of the range gauge, all kinds of stuff like that. All of these, of course, involve some kind of trade-off. If you want to go out to a greater range, you probably will end up with a lower frequency of observation. So you can't do everything all at once, so you balance all these options, get the best operational scan you can. This is kind of an illustration, a very crude copying illustration of how the radar works in plan PPI mode, constant elevation scan, where the dish basically rotates around the central axis at a constant elevation angle. Then the PPI, the plan position indicator, which is the kind of raw, planar data that's produced by the radar, is built up in this manner. Basically, the radar sends a beam out in one direction, gets the signal back. That will be the single radial shown in the middle. Then it moves on to the next angle and does that. Each radial is made up of this series of gates that's kind of shown like this ladder structure. So what you end up with, once you've completed a whole rotation, is something like that showed on the right, this kind of eye-shaped structure where each wedge is a different radial. There will be a lot more than are shown here, and each circle, range circle, will be a different gate. Again, there will be a lot more than shown here. So you build up this whole image from a series of gates that make a radial, and then a series of radials make up a PPI or a scan. And as I mentioned, we can control the length of gates, the maximum range, the rotation rate of the radar, all kinds of stuff, but everything is the trade-off. And this is what the PPI would generally look like. So this is an example of how it comes out. Basically just showing this circle of values represented as different colors centered on the radar. In general, what we use for our rainfall analysis is the lowest elevation angle that we establish, because that will have the beam, the radar, pointing as close to the ground as possible, and usually we're interested in what's happening at the surface. So now we get into some nice equations. I'll keep these as brief as I can, but again, I think it's useful to talk a little bit about the relationships that we use to get rainfall rates from the radar parameters. So this is the first equation. This is what's been used for 60 or 70 years now to retrieve rainfall rates from radar observations using the radar reflectivity. The radar reflectivity is a basic measure of power returned to the radar by the collection of raindrops that the beam encounters. And as you can see, this has a power law relationship, which means that there is some great sensitivity to the measurement of Z when we're converting that to the rainfall rate. So small errors in reflectivity can lead to large errors in the retrieved rainfall rate due to this power law relationship. The values of A and B are nominally constant, but in general what happens is we vary those to account for different types of rain. So there are a number of accepted values or combinations of A and B that we would use for, say, convective rain compared to rain from tropical storms, for example. This relationship is really based upon the distribution of the sizes of the raindrops that the radar encounters. So each raindrop will scatter a little bit of signal back to the radar. The larger the raindrop, the more signal gets scattered back, and the more raindrops we have, the more signal will get scattered back. So we're interpreting this observation of power return to the radar as a collection of raindrops that we then calculate the rainfall rate from. The problem with this is that the drop size distribution of rain is very variable and not always well known. So the idea, the polarization capability is to add further constraints, independent measurements, so that we can characterize this drop size distribution better and get a better rainfall rate. I'm going to present a whole bunch of equations similar to the one we just saw relating reflectivity to rainfall rate. And in these cases, the rainfall rate is going to be an instantaneous rate. So the radar is observing one moment, so we get an instantaneous rainfall rate, which will be expressed in millimeters of rain per hour. So if we want to then produce a time integral of the rainfall rate, the total rain observed, then we need to kind of sum these observations over time. The scans, this instantaneous observation approximately every 4 minutes, but that's one of the things we can vary. We can make that go faster or slower and do all kinds of things. As I mentioned, the dual polarization capability gives us some other parameters, mostly these things, the differential reflectivity, ZDR, and the specific differential phase shift, KDP. These mostly measure the shape of the drop. And as larger raindrops become less spherical, this information on the shape of the drops that's revealed by these parameters, that's how many big raindrops we have compared to how many small raindrops we have. KDP has the advantage of being sensitive both to the shape and the number of drops, so we can actually use it on its own. So in general, we have a whole variety of options for combining these parameters to give us both the number and shape and therefore distribution of sizes of the drops in the beam, and those are kind of represented on the right-hand side by these different rainfall algorithms. Again, A, B, and C in this case are constants that, again, are not necessarily well defined and may need some calibration. But there are large number of public relationships which we're in the process of. So in general, we have these rain rate estimations that are either based on reflectivity, differential reflectivity, specific differential phase, or some combination of all of these. And this kind of gives an indication of kind of the variety of combinations we could use and the advantages and disadvantages of these. The figure at the bottom of the page shows an example radar image that we actually got yesterday. On the left-hand side is the reflectivity, and on the right-hand side is the differential phase shift. Yesterday morning's rain was very interesting. Yesterday or the day before? Yesterday. Because it was very heavy. And not only was it heavy, the heavy rain caused attenuation around the radar, so you see very low reflectivities in space, lots of blues and greens, whereas the differential phase shift, which is not sensitive to attenuation, higher values that we can kind of use to correct the attenuated reflectivity. This table shows a set of equations. Again, I'm not going to set a test at the end of this, so you don't have to remember all this stuff. But again, it just shows the variety of published equations out there. These are all taken from a paper by Rizhkov et al., 2005. They may not all be suitable for use with our radar. So we're giving them all a good test. The idea is that we have 3 RZ relationships, 6 KDP relationships, 5 ZDR relationships, and 4 KDP ZDR relationships, which we're testing. And on top of these, we have some alternative processing of the reflectivity and the differential reflectivity, which actually means we're doing about twice as many of these, or in some cases, 4 times, as we're testing the different quality control products. And this kind of illustrates this. We have obviously non-quality controlled reflectivity, but we also have quality controlled reflectivity. We have quality controlled and unquality controlled differential reflectivity. So putting all those combinations together, for example, for the relationships using both reflectivity and differential reflectivity, we have 4 different combinations of quality control and non-quality control data. The main software we're using to do this processing is the WIDS, the Warning Decision Support System software, produced at the National Severe Storms Laboratory. This gives us a attenuation-corrected reflectivity and attenuation-corrected ZDR. As I've already mentioned, we're not sure whether this attenuation correction is accurate for our radar, so we need to do some more testing on that. It also, within itself, produces its own rainfall products, along with the ones I've already mentioned. It does this one at the bottom, the RREC, which is an echo classification product where the software tries to determine what kind of precipitation is present and applies one of the equations to the data based on what it thinks is there. So if there's hail present, it will use a different process to if it thinks there's no hail present, for example. Here's an example of kind of the different results you can end up with. So these are 4 images showing the aerial rainfall for a section of our coverage area. These are produced in MATLAB. The rainfall rate scale goes up to 150 millimeters an hour, which is about 6 inches an hour, for those of you who don't work in metric. And we have a ZR relationship top left, a different ZR relationship top right, a KDP R relationship bottom left, and an RZ-ZDR relationship bottom right. And you can see that, in particular, the Z-ZDR relationship in the bottom right is producing much higher rainfall rates. This is Z-ZDR3, which is one of the 5 Z-ZDR relationships we are testing. So there's a whole bunch of these we can do. This is for one particular time on one particular day. The next thing we can do in WIDS is to produce the merged or gridded output. So we can transfer, and this is what I tend to do, transfer from the polar coordinate system onto a Cartesian grid, which to my mind makes kind of quantitative analysis much easier. The grid we're using at the moment is a 5-kilometer resolution grid, which gives us a grid of about 384 by 384 pixels, representing an area of 192 kilometers by 192 kilometers, centered on the radar. But we can vary that in any way we like. We can change the resolution to finer, to larger. We can extend the grid, although we don't have data further out than this at the moment. We can do sections. We can do anything we like. The real restriction is on the lower end of the resolution, where once we get below between 250 meters, then we're actually getting smaller than the real resolution of the data, of the range gates produced by the data. So you would be oversampling in a way which would be unrealistic. The files produced are in a format known as NetCDF, which again is a data format commonly used in atmospheric science. This contains latitude and longitude information in the form of it tells you the corners of the grid and the spacing of the grid in decimal degrees. What I then generally do is take these NetCDF files and ingest them into MATLAB. MATLAB reads in this file format. This allows us to then convert that file format into any other kind of format that MATLAB will output. So at the moment, we're outputting .mat, the MATLAB data format, but we could easily output text format files, or there's all kinds of other formats that can be produced. This also allows us to pick out point values for points of interest. And at the moment, the testing of the products is taking place within MATLAB. As I said, there is the location information within the files, within the headers of the files. That goes for both the polar data and the gridded data, and it goes for the raw data, if anyone wants to try using that, and these net CDF files. One of the things we plan to do is produce GeoTIFF, so geolocated files, if that's what people want. So one of the things I'll be asking is whether that's what people want, or we can pick a location of interest because we have the lat-long information, and we can pick out those points we want to pick out. So this is an example of some point data I picked out for one day, for one day. These were, again, consolidated into hourly totals rather than trying to work with the 3 or 4 minute samples that we had. And so this is showing the rainfall rate detected by the radar on 13th of December last year. Might have been 27th. I might have that date wrong. The black line shows the pixel we picked out that corresponds to Sanborn Field, and the blue line shows the same data for Bradford Farms, the rain gauge site there. And the idea is we can now take this data, compare it to the rain gauges, and see what kind of calibration we need to do. On the right here, there's another example. This is just kind of accumulated rainfall, again for the same period, this time showing 5 different rainfall retrievals. I think this one must be for Sanborn again. Again, showing the variety, kind of the range of the dependence on the rainfall retrieval caused by choosing different rainfall retrieval algorithms. So the idea again is we can compare this to rain gauge data and see which of these is working the best. We also have a couple of distrometers that we've just finished testing and are pretty much ready for deployment. We've had one sitting at South Farm for a while, and the plan is to deploy one of the others to Bradford Farms and maybe bring the third one onto campus if we can find a good site for it. So kind of getting to the end. So the ongoing work we have is really this comparison of these retrieved rainfall rates with gauge data. That will continue as long as we have the project running. We're also testing some different scan strategies to see if we can improve or to optimize the temporal and spatial coverage we do. And again, an ongoing part of this will be testing the attenuation and other quality control options to make sure those are working the way they should. As an aside, just for those of you, in case there's anyone on here who's interested in things other than rainfall, the radar does also provide wind information at many levels across the same coverage domain, and we have picked up other things that are non-meteorological. There was a fire down by Jeff City back in March, a big barn fire, and we could detect the smoke from that fire. We can see cloud layers, and we can, every day, we can see insects, flying insects above the surface. And of the things, again, we're working on is optimizing the best scan strategy for bug detection. So if anyone's interested in bugs, we'll see what we can see. To wrap up the summary of the data we currently have available on the EPSCoR server, we have some gridded rainfall rates in this NetCDF and the MATLAB format. We also, of course, have all the raw data, the individual parameters, both in gridded and polar coordinates, raw polar coordinates. We've also been picking out the rainfall rates from all the algorithms for the locations where we already have gauges located, so most notably the climate station gauges that are within range of the radar. We've also been collecting, there's the archive of raw data, not only from our radar, but also from the Weather Service radars in St. Louis and Kansas City, because one of our aims is to do the same process, produce rainfall rates from their data and compare the data from the Weather Service radars to our own. My questions to you, before you have questions for me, things I'd like you to think about and let me know is, what is the data you want? What is the format you want it in? What is the coverage you would like to see? Are there ways we can process it or even collect it that would help you with a particular idea you have in mind? That can be to do with rainfall, or, as I said, there are non-rainfall things we can do as well. So it's kind of, what do you want from us, and how's the best way we can provide it? On my part, another request is we'd like to put out some more rain gauges. In particular, if anyone has a good site, secure, open, that we can use, we'd love to get some more gauges out there, spread out, cover the domain of the radar more thoroughly. And I think that's it. So, if anyone's still awake, I guess you can unmute and ask or comment or whatever.
This is Chris. I'm not one of the experts who would actually be using your data, because I'm just going to be storing it. But I was just wondering, so if we save the raw data, then in the future, if somebody decides that they wanted to have some information at a different resolution, would you be able to recompute it?
Yeah, we can reprocess. I mean, we obviously can't change the raw data the way it was scanned initially, but yeah, I mean, that's one of our plans. Yeah, we need to keep all the raw data because, yeah, there may be different ways of processing, different QC processes, different things we can do with it. Yeah.
So, like when you said 5-kilometer resolution, and then, but you could go, you couldn't go down to 250 meters. Like when you say that resolution, that's a diameter or a radius?
No, for that I'm talking the Cartesian grid. So the gridded data that's on the square or rectangular grid, at the moment, we're doing that at 0.5 kilometer. We could take that to any value, but I would suggest a minimum of about 250 meters.
So can I ask that question a different way? This is John. So if Rico Holden wanted data from Tucker Prairie on July 4th, would you be able to give him data from the northeast quadrant versus the southwest quadrant?
How big's Tucker Prairie?
Let's say it's 50 acres.
Oh, I have to convert acres to meters.
It's about 20 hectares.
That's big enough.
About 20 hectares.
Yeah,
20 hectares. Okay, 20 hectares. Yeah, that should be hectares 100. Yes. I mean, we should certainly be able to differentiate. I mean, like I said, there's a limit to that resolution. But yeah, if you've got an area that's a couple of kilometers across, we should be able to see the difference from one end to the other.
and that's all captured in the raw data.
Yeah.
But I want a lot higher resolution.
Well, Felix wants to know what's the maximum resolution you can give him. What's the typical field?
That will depend a little bit on exactly how far you are from the radar.
So at Bradford, for instance.
For Bradford, I don't know, probably 150 meter resolution.
Okay, so can you tune or adjust it to get even better, or is that your standard setting, or is that maximizing all the settings to maximize resolution?
Okay. Well, there will be different minimum or maximum resolutions in different directions. So the resolution is set by the gate length. If I go, let me go up so. I'll find the right figure. The idea of this figure, if I can mouse over it. So if you look at the single radial, the ultimate resolution is set by this kind of range gate. The range gate, the minimum range gate length is 130 meters. That's the minimum the radar will do.
Okay.
The minimum width, as you can see, depends on your distance from the radar. As the beam gets wider, the further from the radar you are. Bradford, we're really close in. I'd have to do the calculation, but it's probably, my guess would be that similar 100, 150 meter width.
So how about at Jeff Farms? Right by the radar.
There's such a thing as being too close. So we don't actually get data from right by the radar. You get all these kind of noise effects that you just can't cope. So there's kind of a minimum range, which is probably about a quarter of a mile.
Okay. So at a quarter of a mile, how close can you get?
How wide is the beam then? I would have to get, I mean, the beam would be very, very narrow, probably certainly tens of meters wide. But again, the length of the gate will still be that 130 meters.
Okay.
So in terms of calibrating and getting rainfall estimates, do you have to do that different for each site? So are you going to have rain gauges at Bradford to calibrate Bradford and rain gauges at Tucker Prairie to calibrate Tucker Prairie, or can you use?
We should be able to use a single calibration. I mean, you want to do it over a number of sites just for completeness. And, yeah, without getting into complexity, because you may have a different type of rain in one area to another, there may be a case for using different algorithms in different parts of the domain at the same time. There's also this issue of attenuation, which will be different in different directions. But once we've established how that works using gauges that exist, then those relationships, that processing should hold. But I'd still like
Neil?
to have the yeah.
Neil, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is
I
Pat.
can.
I'm sure you're aware of this, but I want to put in the caveat with those automated gauges that you got at Bradford, that you have at Sanborn and the Jeff Institute. Those are tipping bucket rain gauges, and they underestimate rain events, especially when you look at the intensity of rainfall. Generally, it could be as high as 10 to 12%.
Yes.
So, for example, the way I can compare that is that we actually have an 8-inch standard gauge located at Sanborn right next to a tipping bucket. And we've had that for years, monitoring and comparing the two. And the past rain events we had just over the past couple of days, they were pretty intense, especially the one yesterday. But the rainfall total at Sanborn from the tipping bucket was 1.89 inches, and the gauge right next to it, the standard 8-inch gauge, which does a better job, was 2.12 inches. And so that's about a 10% underestimate from the tipping bucket.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to get the exact match. We're trying to get that. So, it's a combination of the two, because you want the accumulation to be correct, but you also want the instantaneous to be correct. So it's matching to all those things. Again, there's the point is always that you're not measuring the same thing with the radar as you are with the gauge, because the radar's measuring this area compared to the point measurement of the gauge. So you're not trying to get an exact match. Yeah, you have to account for the biases in both instruments. Yes. But I will be. Yeah.
Yeah, this is sorry, I interrupt you. I had a separate question. This is David Heisey at Lincoln. I'm curious about the size of these raindrops. How do you have a ground truth for that, or is it just a visual observation of this is a heavier rain? How do you determine the size of the raindrops and kind of comparison to the radar data?
That is what the distrometers do. So we have these 3 distrometers, and they actually measure the size of the raindrops.
I see.
And how many of each size and their fall velocity. And those also don't have the same, well, they, like all instruments, they have their own set of characteristics. But again, we have those next to the rain gauges, or one of the rain gauges at the moment. So we're getting these kind of independent measurements of all these things. So one of my research goals is actually to see if we're getting the whole rainfall size distribution correct. So, yeah. Anyone else?
Professor Fox, the name's Tony Lupo at the University of Missouri, and a colleague was asking me if CocoROS data would be of any use for ground truthing. I'm imagining it was Charlie Nyland, and he was wondering if that would be of any use for the.
Yes. I mean, all data all data can be used. I mean, the thing, again, the totals Pat was talking about just now, and the COCORAS data, we would have to go to the daily time step. So for the basic climatology of rain, I think that's all valuable. If you're interested in the shorter period effects like soil erosion and stream flow, then we need the higher time resolution. But certainly in terms of the calibration process, all rainfall data is good rainfall data.
Neil, you can look at Pat Ganan's additional reports, and he'll give you paragraphs about rainfall rates with COCORAS.
Okay.
That's true. I'll check the comments sections for each of the COCORAS observers, and they, like myself, they tell you when the rain started, and they actually give you some ideas of how much rain fell over certain time periods.
Yes. Your gauge I'll use, Pat.
This is John again. So with the radar, what's the time resolution? 4 minutes?
At the moment, we're running about a 4-minute scan. We can shorten that. We can lengthen that. It's one of those options. So, and again, we can actually do it because the 4 minutes. So what the radar does is it does this series of elevation scans. We generally use the lowest elevation, so it takes 4 minutes for it to do 2 consecutive lowest elevation scans. But we can use the other elevations in between, but they would have some restriction.
And then my question to Felix is, what time resolution does he want?
Felix, what time resolution do you want?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I need spatial resolution more than time resolution, I guess.
Okay. Well, I mean, at some point, you and I need to get together to discuss, what you really want this for and how we can best
Sounds
provide.
good to me.
Yes.
Chris, I kind of interrupted you, and I know you really wanted to know about this. So do you have any other questions, Chris?
No, I just wanted him to give a talk and everybody hear it. Just kind of more on our general, the project. And I know that, like, the resolution seems, Felix is interested in things at the single plant level, I think. But I don't know if we have somebody in the project who would be, I guess Rico was more like of a canopy level kind of guy. But it seems like we could get, like, I don't know. So me not being an expert in any of these things, it seems like this would be useful combined with UAV data, looking at sections of, crops at the canopy level and looking at responses that way. And so I don't know if there's anybody who knows more than me that could think about that. But that's all I have to say, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that you should be able, with the radar, to observe differences in rainfall amounts, what by most standards is very high resolution, so 100-meter, 200-meter differences. So you should be able to see differences in rainfall totals from one area of a field to another, and if you can identify the plant response to that, then you have a good data set for kind of that comparison. So if you can do the remote sensing using the UAV, the leaf color type and relate that to rainfall amounts, then I don't see why that's not possible.
Let me throw
sorry. Go ahead.
Let me throw in genomics then. So if we're going to then integrate this with genomics data, transcriptomics data, what kind of sampling you're talking there? I mean, you're going to sample a single plant, but you're not going to sample every plant in the field. So, I mean, have you all talked about that?
I've actually, when we were writing the proposal, tried to find if anybody in the world ever tried to do that, and I couldn't find anything. And it does seem like that, you really would have to get to like a microclimate to be able to do that. So, I don't know. But on a kind of unrelated thing, I'll just say this, is that I was wondering on like an unrelated thing, if like the water droplet size, if you guys have, the people working on soil hydrology, do you use that? Like, is there any thing about, when the drop sizes are bigger, we don't actually get as much water into the ground because it runs off faster, and then the plants don't take up as much, so I didn't know if there's anybody who cared or looked into something like that. But
well,
I don't know.
Chris, we definitely care about it, but I'm not sure about whether anybody on the project is doing it.
Well, one of my main research areas, this is Neil again, whose voice you should know by now. I work with Alan Thompson in biological engineering. We've done quite a lot of work on rainfall, kinetic energy, and soil erosion. And so the idea, and this is why I started with these distrometers quite a few years ago, is the soil erosion, again, is very sensitive to these larger drops. You want to know that drop size distribution, how much of the rainfall is contained in these larger drops, because they contain all the kinetic energy that can dislodge the soil. In terms of the runoff question, again, then you're talking again about these. It's less to do, I think, with the drop sizes, more to do with the rainfall, the instantaneous rainfall intensity. And that we certainly see.
Then now I'm going to switch back again. Back on the phenotype to genotype and environment question, kind of like a missing link there is, how can you measure, how can you relate a canopy phenotype to a plant phenotype if you're going to measure, if your environmental measurements are at the, a higher canopy level, I'm sure that there's a canopy kind of phenotype that can be related to the plant phenotypes that maybe sometime in the future somebody could figure out how to actually do genomics. And the reason, and this is like a weird way that I just thought about, is that a lot of stuff, my work in honeybees is like a lot of it is done on the colony level rather than the individual bee. And so there is like ways that you can somehow relate the phenotypes, but I think that would be the way to do it if we wanted to get genomics in there.
But it's not a problem. We can do it, but, who does it?
Yeah.
Todd.
Huh? Todd. All right.
No, but you would plant a genotype. You plant the same genotype in some plots.
Canopy, and that's what we're working on is with the remote sensing, we're collecting canopy level data, we're collecting ground level data on the canopy as well as the single plants that make up that canopy, right? So in our case, they're uniform hybrids, so they're genetically identical, they can be sampled, but depending on what type of genomics you're doing, you have to have specific questions, and the time resolution in that case then becomes extremely important.
But you would not sample individual plants, you'd sample population.
Yeah, population of the plant to be representative for that particular treatment or condition.
So we really aren't looking at single plants yet, Chris. I think we are looking at canopy level at what we're doing right now.
Well, I guess maybe kind of a bigger. Well, I mean, because Felix wants a really small resolution, so it might at some point if we can get radar resolution. I mean, not small, high resolution, small area. But if we can get to the point where we get the size of our canopy matching the resolution of the radar, I guess.
Right, and I think that's what is I don't think anybody is doing, right? Is having the size of field and the radar as well as the UAV fly the size of fields that matches the minimum resolution of the radar. And I think that would be, to link it up, our fields are too small and too variable in terms of the pixel size that you get from the radar to make any sense of it, I think. And then the other aspect is that it's not only the rainfall, but within those large fields, then you need to bring in the soil science aspect in that the variability in the soil has to be assessed in terms of soil water holding capacity and potentially infiltration rates, and that then translates together with the rainfall, obviously, into the response of the plants. And we have discussed that separately a little bit with some soil scientists, Keith Goyne and as well as others. But I don't think that anybody right now is set up to do that.
No, but that's something Moser could.
Hey, how about if we get
to... people could do. It's not so difficult to do, but...
Right, but if that's something you want, things to tap into Moser to do that.
How about if we get some insect research into this EPSCoR project and do some bug detection?
Yeah, you need to write a grant.
Well, I'm interested in bug detection, but what elevations, what levels are we talking about at the lowest elevation angle for the radar?
Again, that depends on range from the radar. Closer to the radar, so if we're talking about over South Farm and Bradford, we're pretty close to the ground.
So is that 60 meters, 90 meters? What's close to the ground mean?
I would have to do the calculation. I'll pull out my graph. Yeah, probably that close.
Okay.
Tens of meters out of Bradford Farm.
But Neil, you know what I think would be useful for the group is if you could do some calculations and give us some resolutions for radar at Bradford, potentially at South Farm, and at Tucker Prairie. That way people would have that information and could be thinking about then how that might impact how they design their experiments.
Sure, that's no problem.
And if there's anybody on the call that wants other locations, just send an email to Neil and let him know.
Professor.
Modelers need any?
I was thinking people from Lincoln University, because they're the ones doing the hydrologic modeling, I think.
Right.
So I was waiting for them to speak up. I don't know if anybody's done it before a lot, but it'd be cool to have the distributed rainfall that you get from the radar and used to drive a hydrologic model. And then SWAT's daily time step apparently only, but if there was one that was sub-daily time step, then maybe that's something new that can be done. But I figured that Lincoln University...
Well, it's not new, but it can be done. And
okay,
it's something we can do. I mean, Mike Simpson, who's my doctoral student, that's one of the things he's meant to be doing, working on for Hinkson Creek, and I think, again, the guys at Lincoln are meant to be doing something similar. So, and that's kind of where my focus has been in terms of the radar data format, which is why I'm interested in how else other people want it delivered.
Neil, if people use 5-minute rainfall intensities to drive a hydrologic model over like 100 kilometers squared before, or 500?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think it's been done much in the U.S., but they've been doing it. Well, there's been a lot of work on urban hydrology using these kind of techniques. I was doing it in Britain like 20 years ago now. So it's something that's been ongoing for quite a while.
Other questions for Neil? Great. Well, Neil, thanks very much.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Neil.
Those were really useful.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Professor.
you. And again, I invite anyone to contact me directly, come meet and talk about exactly what we need. And thank you all.